Today we're looking at 1 Thessalonians 2 and 3, and really all the way through the first three chapters of this letter, 1, 2 and 3, Paul's constantly doing two things, and it kind of refers a bit back to the stuff that we did at the end of Colossians. He's giving thanks to God and he's praying. Those two things, and he said, I pray day and night for you. And in this passage, this gives us, as we mentioned in Colossians, this gives us one of the keys to a good prayer life and one of the major themes in all of Paul's letters, and that is being thankful. Key to most of what we do is to be thankful and to thank God. And you know, God reminds us when we thank him how good he is, and so when we give thanks to him, it reminds us how good God is and what wonderful things he's done in our lives, and it also builds our faith to ask for more and to expect more in our own lives. So we think, well, if God did that and we're so grateful for it, then what more could he do? You know, what else could he do in my life? What might he want to do today if he would intervene in those ways in my life and the life of others? And it builds our faith in that way. And I remember for a few years, my wife and I used to totally live by faith in terms of just trusting God for money. And that was a really big step for us to take, but we felt like God had told us to. And I remember in the times when it was hard, because it was hard quite a lot when you've got a bill to pay and you've got absolutely no money and no apparent way of getting it, just to keep trusting God. And it's tough in that moment when you've got, it's not just you, there's two of you and you want to provide in that way. And in those times I used to thank God and say, thank you God for when you provided this, when you gave us a cheque through the post for that, and when we thought it wasn't. And I reminded myself of all the good things that God did, and it built my faith that he would provide. And I remember I used to read books by people like George Muller, you know, someone who really saw God do some amazing things in his life in providing finances and food. And I would go back to his books or Hudson Taylor's books, and I would read those stories again, and I would say, thank you God that you provided for George Muller and for Hudson Taylor. Thank you that you provided for me. And I would have that attitude of thankfulness, but it also built my faith and to pray and to say, God, because you've done that, I believe that you can do it for me. I believe that I can pay that bill on Thursday even though I've got no money on Monday. And time again over years and years for us, God did that every time, and there's so many stories that I could tell about it. But the point is that the more we are thankful, the more that it affects our prayer life and helps us in our prayer life. So let's cultivate a life of thankfulness.